Now, if you drink anything out of plastic bottles, feed your baby with plastic, or heat up leftovers in plastic, you'll want to listen up. Last week, the Canadian government labeled bisphenol A, a chemical used to make plastic, toxic. So a rush to pull bottles with BPA off shelves there ensued and caused American consumers to turn their bottles upside down to check if they should dispose of them here as well. And making that decision has proved difficult.
Mary Tyler Johnson is an environmental health consultant and mom to an active 16-month-old. Having to worry about chemicals in plastic baby bottles is just added stress.
I think it's really difficult for parents to have to make these decisions, and I don't think the burden should be on parents to have to find safer alternatives. There are just so many things that we have to think about in our day-to-day life. This should not be one of them.
Mary and her husband used glass bottles when Reeve was born, but once he built up that throwing arm of his, they had to switch to plastic, because after all, even shatterproof glass tends to break when thrown across the room. To help her sort through the plastic confusion, she created her own cheat sheet for shopping trips. It shows exactly what kind of plastics are okay to use based on the recycling code on the bottom. But even for someone who makes a living studying chemicals and their impact on the environment, it's still hard to understand exactly what to buy and which plastics to avoid.
Now, joining us now to sort through some of the confusion is Dr. Leo Trisande from Mount Sinai. He is with the Children's Environmental Health Center. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's talk about the big issue. What are the big chemicals that we need to be most concerned about in the plastics?
There are three types of plastic of concern. First, which we focused on in the segment, was bisphenol A, which is denoted by the number 7 on the bottom of the bottle, has been linked to developmental disabilities and obesity in certain studies. Number 6 contains styrene, which is a chemical that has been linked with cancer. And number 3 contains phthalates, which are chemicals that are increasingly being linked to impacts on the endocrine system, on our hormones specifically. Those are the three chemicals of concern, and that's why it's especially important to take the safe and simple measure and look on the bottom of the bottle.
Okay, so 3, 6, and 7 are the ones you don't want. So, for example, this is a 1, so that's okay to drink.
That's safe to drink. Now, that's a single-use bottle. You don't want to reuse those single-use bottles because they're especially hard to clean. And as you clean them, harsh chemicals can degrade the plastic, and it's easier for microbes and even some of those chemicals to get stuck in there, and then you recontaminate yourself when you reuse them.
Okay, now here's a Chinese food container. I use these. I reheat everything in these. So this doesn't have a number on the bottom. What do you do then?
First of all, I wouldn't microwave plastic containers, period. They potentially leach plastic
Tupperware,
chemical. In general, they're not made for microwaving, and it's especially important not to wash them with harsh, even dishwashing detergent, because they can scratch or etch the plastic even at levels we can't see with our own eyes. And so those lead to residues that get back into the food and causing us difficulties. The other thing I'd say is if the plastic doesn't have a number, you can assume safety.
Okay, and I noticed on these little Dora Explorer, it says actually you can't boil any of these.
Right.
So don't boil any plastics.
In general, it's the safe thing to do not to boil it or microwave it.
Okay, so this is a 5. This is okay for kids.
That is okay, and that's okay for reuse. Those are designed for reuse.
Okay, and what about some of the other things here? I mean, is this something that parents definitely should be looking for, the Born Free? I mean, what do you want to look for on the packaging, aside from a number like a 1 or a 5?
The bottles that have the safe numbers, though, the 1, the 2, the 4, and the 5, are good for use. If brands prove that they don't have bisphenol A or other harsh chemicals that can cause hazards, especially to children who are vulnerable, it's a good move.
Okay, so for those of us out there who use plastics in every day, you're saying stop microwaving right away, don't boil anything. I mean, is it the type of thing where a parent that's using a plastic bottle should stop right away and switch to glass?
Glass and aluminum are really good alternatives. Realistically, they're not usable for everything. You need to use plastic because those bottles don't break, for instance. But there's a good happy medium, and as I like to say, there's some safe and simple measures that families can take to protect themselves.
Okay, you were speaking about metal. What about this bottle?
This bottle is an aluminum bottle. It's a great alternative to glass or to plastic. It doesn't break, and it hasn't been shown to be associated with any health health effects.
Okay, so we'll end on the good note there. Thank you so much. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Leo Trisande.